Up at the front here. I want to welcome people tonight. Weather was favorable, even in this cold winter we're suffering through. We've got a great lecture about to happen tonight. Bruce Kuwabara has come to join us. I've known Bruce probably since about 1986. He may not remember, but we met in Rome. I had a brother who was studying at U of T architecture at the study abroad program, and Bruce was one of the professors that was over with the students, and I got to be a guest critic one night in Rome, and have known Bruce since that time. My name's Tom Tillman. I'm an architect here in town, but I'll do a little bit of a bio on Bruce. Fortunately, I've got a condensed version here because it's not just lengthy, it's good. Bruce truly is a leading architect in Canada. He received the RAIC Gold Medal in 2006, and in 2012 was invested as an Officer of the Order of Canada for shaping our built landscape in lasting ways, and I think you're going to see some of new shaping that's about to happen. He's a founding partner of KPMB, that's Kuwabara, Payne, McKenna, Blumberg Architects in Toronto, and has earned both public and critical admiration for projects of national significance, such as Canada's National Ballet School, the Canadian Museum of Nature, the Bell Lightbox for the Toronto International Film Festival, and the Manitoba Hydro Place. Also committed to raising the profile of Canadian architecture. He's taught at the University of Toronto, which I just spoke about, but also at Harvard University, and acts as an advocate for excellence in architecture, urbanism, and sustainable design. His current projects, which I think we're going to get a bit of a taste of tonight, include the Remai Art Gallery of Saskatchewan, the home of the Department of Economics and International Initiatives at Princeton University, the new Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University in Chicago, the Global Center for Pluralism of the Aga Khan Foundation, the Ronald Perelman Center for Political Science and Economics at the University of Pennsylvania, and the Athletes Village for the Toronto 2015 Pan Am Games. Bruce is from Hamilton. He's almost local, and is a graduate of the University of Toronto. He's the chair of the Waterfront Toronto's Design Review Panel, and is also chair of the Board of Trustees for the Canadian Centre of Architecture in Montreal. I had the good fortune to have dinner with Bruce tonight, and I spooked him a little bit because he's actually doing work quasi-connected to me. My brother-in-law is with Brookfield Developments in Toronto, and Bruce is working on the Bay Adelaide Centre, another of the towers that's going on there. And I said, listen, I need some good information. And I think I may have scared Bruce a little bit, but what came back, and he reached out to the people that Bruce is working with, was that he's passionate about the history of both architecture and art. He's a great big picture thinker, but just as comfortable in the details, and I think we'll see some of that. He's a good listener, and he's humble. And with that, Bruce, I'll let you. Thank you.
Actually, I thought you were going to tell a really good joke, and I was really getting ready for the introduction. But this talk was going to be different a few days ago, and it was still going to be titled "Every Building Implies a City," and it's a line of thought that I've carried around in my head for quite a while now, because the thinking is that the future of Canada and the world is in cities. It's urbanization and all the issues and problems and possibilities that come with that. And that we need, you and everyone, needs to really understand how to build cities and communities. I think it's really, really important to understand that every single building that you do has an implication for the future and how we might relate to each other in cities. You know, the history of Canadian architecture is quite romantic, and it has a lot to do with major figures, great designers, great architects, and artists who deal with landscape. And it's the kind of nature narrative. But a really good friend of mine who teaches at Waterloo is a classmate. He said, he said architecture is a compelling fiction. And there are things that people say to you, and they can't even remember saying it to you. But he said this to me, and it had a huge impact on the way I think about every single project, because frankly, you know, architecture is a compelling fiction, and you really have to have a great narrative to drive that vision of how we want to live together as Canadians. And I think this is very Canadian as a discussion piece. I mean, one of the great benefits that we have is that we are Canadian. I've thought about this so much. I think that, you know, I did the embassy in Berlin, and you know, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lloyd Axworthy, asked me, well, what does it mean to be Canadian? And I thought so much about it. And there are many, many things to say about, you know, hospitality and so on. But I basically came to openness, the concept of openness, which I could, whoa. Is it because I'm standing too close? Okay. So anyway, so just remember the notion of openness. So I've swerved the talk. The first part is what I would have talked about, and it's simply different strategies that we've really thought about very deeply that I think help forge a way to the future for me, because we're now in our 27th year of practice. So it starts with my partners and the kind of fundamental fact that I have two women partners, and it changes the way you think, changes the way you think about conversation and problem solving. Our building, which is a loft, which is just a big open space. I think architects have a lot to teach the world in terms of integrative thinking and interdisciplinarity, because that's exactly what we do. You know, the school that my son is going to, I'm so happy he got into the school. They had as their curriculum 4 modalities of learning behavior. And the first was research. The second one was, they call it researcher, designer, developer, presenter. And I went to the curriculum night and I said, that's exactly what architects do. City builders do that. Then I saw this, which is a friend of mine, Stephen Marsh. You should follow him. He's a very controversial and provocative thinker. Wrote this article. He's Canadian. Is Facebook making us lonely? And I took the picture on the right, and it was taken in Philadelphia. And it could be anywhere. But fundamentally, the first idea, which I think is essentially Canadian, is having confidence in the idea of the public realm. I got that through one of my teachers, George Baird, but the fundamental role of architecture in the city is to make the public realm. That's why you make architecture, to make cities. So Vaughan City Hall, I've done 3 city halls, Kitchener City Hall, Richmond City Hall, and then Vaughan over a long period of time, probably at least maybe 8 to 10 years between each one. But every one of them was about trying to use the building to form the space. And the space, I mean, I really love this picture, but it is about saying that the council chamber and the square, the little piazza, are equal, and the most important one is the square. Second set of ideas are what I call new hybrids, and I would use the TIFF Bell Lightbox as that. It's a cultural institution that really has a huge impact on the economy and development of film. It's the home for film lovers. It's the epicenter for the Toronto International Film Festival, which happens every September. It's probably the best 10 days of the year in the city. It's 180,000 square feet, defined by a strata title. They own the building, 5 floors. There are 6 floors of parking below grade. The owners of the land are Ivan Reitman, remember him? Meatballs, and I don't know if he did Caddyshack, but anyways, Canadian, very successful. His father owned a car wash. He was always waiting for the right development. The Toronto International Film Festival put out a proposal call. All the developers in Toronto said, great, we're here, we'll partner with you. The Toronto International Film Festival owned no land, they were renting space. And so the Reitman family teamed up with Daniels Corporation, who are residential developers and very good ones. They're the ones with a social conscience. And they put together the whole package, and then we were in a competition for the TIFF Bell Lightbox and Festival Tower. So it's a condominium tower. It has restaurants, which we ended up doing. We had to recompete for them. But it's a very big stack of program. And what we wanted to do in the new hybrids is make it all work together. What I've learned in these mixed-use projects is every component has to work, it has its own requirements, and then you build a kind of incredible synergy. The third big concept is vertical campus. It has to do with the intensification of the growth in academic population. I saw a statistic that there's something like 240,000 university students, post-secondary students in the province of Ontario, and by 2030 it'll be 420,000. So we're interested in trying to make buildings on campuses that were normally 2, 3, and 4 floors, but make them campuses on multiple levels. And that means getting outside, so you don't have to leave the building to actually be connected to the world of that campus. And so this is the Rotman School of Management, which Eb Zeidler did. And I guess the big idea was to take the event box, that glass room, that was the biggest piece of the program for 400 students, the first year MBA class. And we made a multi-purpose room out of it with retractable seating and a flat floor. There were 3 locations for it. One would be below ground, no one would ever see it. One would be at grade, and you couldn't get around it. And the third, which I walked the site and just said, I think it should be up in the air. And that everyone should know that there's a big event going on. It should not be invisible. It should be very extroverted, because the Rotman School had earned the right to be extroverted. And then we broke the height limit. We pushed the boutique office, the institutes, to the north, because Ron Tom's great Massey College is just on the other side of the laneway. That's where we graduate as architecture students at the University of Toronto, in his courtyard. Okay, transit-oriented development. In the year 2000, the only way we could get a job in Montreal, because they really hate people from Toronto and Montreal, especially architects, is we competed for 1 million square feet for Concordia University. And it's right on the metro line, and we have 0 parking, none. It's a gateway project where all the buses come on to Rue Guy, and actually this building, you're seeing 3 buildings. The low building is a 10-story building. It's a loft building for visual arts, visual studies. The first slab building is for engineering. And the Montreal guidelines said you could build a 10-story building on St. Catherine Street. We're right on St. Catherine Street. St. Catherine Street's like really amazing. It's a famous artery where people walk. We did some shadow studies that if we would have built a 10-story wall, that the light would be out of that street mid-afternoon because of the angle in relationship to the sun. So I just made the decision to push the tower back and make a vertical campus. And then the John Molson School of Business was the second phase. And it is 2 slabs that are kind of, one looks to the river, one looks to the mountain. They're all connected below ground under Rue Guy. The public is allowed to go in to the glass atrium on St. Catherine and get to the subway. Then heritage. We did the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa. It's the 3rd highest ranked heritage building in the country. The other 2 are on the hill. And David Ewart, who designed the original building, imagine, our first national museum was 1910. That's how modern Canada is. And he had a kind of Scottish, baronial, classical planning. He had built a stone tower which began to lean and fall as soon as the building was open. It was one of the great tragedies in his life. He also did the Connaught building and the archive building. And the upper floors of the building were always to be archival, conservators, and the only floors that were to be publicly accessible were the ground and the second floor. People who live in Ottawa, everyone has gone there, they call it the castle. So what we did is the government then decided to take down his tower. So the stump, which was 2 stories, remained there for 100 years. What we did is we said, we're going to go back to the site of the stump and restate a lantern, and we're going to take the new public stair up in that glass lantern to gain public access to the new galleries, which are on the 3rd and 4th floor. It was really controversial, and I had to present this to the Federal Heritage Buildings Review Office, which I don't know if you've ever been in front of them, but you really need to provide a rationale. My rationale was that the glass system, which is a structural glass system from the UK, Pilkington Glass, where the vertical pieces are triple glazed, laminated, and triple glazed. We're in Ottawa. That I looked at the 7-part division on the 2nd floor windows with the trefoil pattern above them, and it's just very elegant. It's just very elegant, and there's 7 divisions. And I basically argued that our glass lantern, which cannot place any load on Ewart's stump, I called Ewart's stump, is actually hung from above. If you can see the drywall, there's a drywall ceiling, but inside that are these steel trusses, and then there is a kind of cradle table of fluted, like twin columns that hold what I call the butterfly stair. The butterfly stair I actually stole from Raphael Moneo, who did the Davis Gallery at Wellesley, where it's a stair, it's like a scissor stair, so it allows you to circulate around the atrium, which you couldn't do once they took David Ewart's tower down. And then this should be automatic, but I have to say that there was a recent survey where Canada ranked, I think, second last in 50-odd countries in terms of sustainability and the reduction of carbon. I think Iran was last. And we think in Canada that we're somehow superior to the Americans, and we are not. And the number 1 country in terms of the national agenda of carbon reduction is the UK. I thought it would be a Scandinavian country. But I want to show just 2 aspects. I don't want to go into all this, but this is by far the most energy efficient building in the country. It is under 90 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. There's nothing close. It's 700,000 square feet. It has natural ventilation 24/7, non-recirculated air. It's a flow-through system. It has a geothermal field, the largest in the country, 480 holes. And it has some beautiful things like operable windows. It's a double glazed, it's actually triple glazed because it's a double wall. You're looking at a pure west facade. I always thought that you would cite the long facade to the south, but we worked with Transolar from Stuttgart, and we developed an incredibly passive system. The tower is a solar chimney. It has a passive preheat function at the top. You see them in the dark. They're hollow section steel tubes with sand in them. The glass is low ironed. It heats up passively, automatically. What Thomas Auer from Transolar said, if you can hear it, you're using energy. The outer layer of the building is a unitized curtain wall system with low iron glass. That's why the iron makes green, the glass go green. Most European buildings use low iron glass. That's why they look lighter. So when the windows open, it's a kind of event in the life of the city. Then I want to show you this. This is the south-facing atrium, which are the lungs of the building. There's 6 stories. There are 3 of these. They're facing due south. And Thomas Auer had a drawing of like a waterfall in the atrium because it would be for the humidification of the dry, cold, super cold. It could be minus 35 in Winnipeg tonight. I don't know, but it's really cold. It's colder than here by a long shot. So with Transolar, we said, well, could it be a visible piece? And they said, yeah, let's think about it as a visible piece. So what it is, it's engineered. It's basically Mylar strips with weights, and there's a recycling system which goes up to a manifold, and the water adheres to what I call the linguini coming right down into the pool. And we did a mock-up in the MTS Center. But this is this is the integration of engineering, sustainability, design, and art. This is the future. It's one thing that does everything. And then we're building out we handed it over just last week. This is housing for 8,000 athletes who are coming to Toronto for the Pan American Games and the Parapan Games. And then it's going to be going through a transition from athletes housing into market rental housing. George Brown College's student residence, which is this building, and market condominium buildings, which Toronto has so much. The difference is this is fairly mid-rise compared to everything else. It's on Front Street. It goes to a park, which is really fantastic. It's totally completed. Corktown Commons, which is flood control from the Don River, which is up to the north. And they're in a series of blocks, which we did not lay out. They were laid out by others, and the public realm was designed by Greg Smallenberg from Vancouver, who's excellent. He did Vaughan City Hall. Renee Daou, who's fantastic, from Montreal, was there. And we partnered with Architects Alliance, who did this building, with MJM, who do the best recreation centers. So we just put together, we curated the city we really want. And it's under construction. I mean, the two heritage buildings, I mean, it's a brownfield site. The Canary Restaurant is there, and the other building is the C&R building, which will become a retail piece. The red frame is the Polyclinic, which will then make a natural transition into a YMCA for the community. And the developer is subsidizing the retail because people are looking to buy into communities. Otherwise, the retail space will be empty forever. And so we now are going to have a running room and a Dark Horse Cafe, which is clearly one of the best coffee places in the city. But it has to do with thinking beyond, because they realize they have something like 600,000 square feet of residential coming on the market, and people are going to want to know what they're buying into, and what they're buying into is the whole neighborhood. Okay, so I'm going to just show 3 projects, and they're not exactly the ones that Tom said, and I'm very excited to be able to do that because I've never presented these publicly before. The first one is a competition we did in Chicago. Was in Evanston. This is the campus for Northwestern University, but at Northwestern, it's sort of, we were talking about it earlier, but the Kellogg School of Management is often the 4th highest ranked business school, certainly in the United States, but it's been around for a long time. They have a woman, an extraordinary Princeton graduate, Sally Blunt, as the dean. The site is where the red dot is. It's a parking lot. Everything is landfill from all the way up to Chicago. We're right on Lake Michigan. And I always loved the image of the detention pond, which I always told them that it looked like an embryo. And you can see the legs and the head. And then the zigzag building is the executive MBA program, which is here. These are all engineering buildings. Perkins and Will are doing the new athletic center. Getch Partners, I don't know if you know them, that's his Mies van der Rohe's grandson, has done the music building. So from here on, these are all buildings on the water. And when I went to the site, I walked along this, which is all artificial. It's all artificial. This is all artificial. And you look at the shoreline all the way. It's new real estate, that everything that was used to stabilize the shore is rounded off. It's curved and smoothed out, concrete, stone, whatever, granite blocks. The character of the campus is like Western a bit. I mean, it's collegiate Gothic. It's buildings like these which were great in their time. And then you see look at what I always thought were verging on the dark ages of architecture, but the 70s here. And you could say, well, is that your reference? But, but now you're seeing a new round of buildings. This is the Perkins and Will Athletic Center on the lake, and it's not under construction yet. We were in a competition. One thing I would say is when you cross the border, the competition stiffens by about 10 times. And we were competing against some architects whose work we really admire, but Cone Peterson Fox, Smith Gill, Adrian Smith, and Gordon Gill, who's Canadian, Cesar Pelli, and who are those guys? Peter Bolin, do you know him? He did the Apple Store. So they wanted a building. They said words like, their motto for Kellogg is think bravely. It's like think different, but think bravely. And their education, they were the leaders in collaboration, which is just everywhere today, but they started it. And that was their brand, and they want to reinvent themselves around that idea. They're not Harvard. They're different. And so the way this competition worked is that there were 4 Jewish guys from Chicago, and all of them had been on the Art Institute board when Renzo Piano did the Art Institute. Their board of trustees had powerful people who were all going to give major gifts to this building. So they're involved in the choice of architects. But you had, over about a 6-month period, 3 interviews. We went to the first interview with that. And they told me later that they thought that maybe they had made the wrong decision and that we shouldn't have even have been in the competition. And then in the second meeting, we kind of were in this zone here. And I'll tell you about this because I think it's really an interesting configuration that every building implies a city. And for me, this building, which is about 400,000 square feet, is huge. It's a big building. And so the way you think about it is not to think of it as one big building. Think of it as, for us, 4 smaller buildings which become one big building. And these are all the different stages. The lake is out here. These are different sketches. Some had berms. Actually, Peter Bolin did a scheme like this. We were the only scheme that didn't have a 5-story atrium. By the size of the site and by the program, everybody was doing a 5-story building. And I asked them, what is the difference between a corporate headquarters and a school of management today? So the 4 buildings, this was our idea, that you would arrive from the west, the lake is here, that you would see the lake, and you'd come to the middle, so this is pretty simple, and you'd see Chicago. There's a line of sight to Chicago. And there'd be 4 buildings, somehow you'd connect them. We called them academic neighborhoods, so we're kind of all these urban metaphors. And then you'll just see, like, we're just going round and round and round and round. We're looking at different ways to position and articulate them. And some of these are kind of nice, and some of them are kind of gawky, but we kept going round and round and round. But essentially what we did is this is the line of sight to Chicago. You entered from the west, and there were this arena in the middle. And I always speculated that Obama from Chicago would be giving a talk here. This is where you would get CNN doing a debate. It was about debate and confrontation. This is like the parliamentary system. Every building implies a city. Every building is a construct. I'm more interested in architecture as a social construct than anything else. There are 4 academic neighborhoods. We had, and I'm showing you 2 versions of this because this is what happened. We had classrooms here, and you'll see everything changing. And I want to show you either the compromises or the skill we have in moving from point to point. We made this video in the competition. This was at our third interview. These are the rounded pebbles, or anything will get rounded out by water. We knew we were doing well because when they had 5 architects, KPF was always presenting last. In the first go-round, we presented second. By the 3rd interview, we were presenting 4th, so we knew we were in 2nd place. it's interesting because they had so many faculty offices, like maybe something like 250 of them. They're all tenured faculty and they all want a view of the lake. And this plan produces a huge amount of perimeter because it's really 4 buildings and they're cinched into the middle. This is our version of the Rotman, but the difference is it's all glass and you can see Chicago, and they wanted to use this in both directions. This is a model we did with an apron around it, terraces. And then I had the idea that it was like an Italian hill town. After Rome, we went up and looked at some hill towns, and and then the faculty said, you know what, we actually don't want students up on our floors. That's great, thank you. These are the atriums that are in every neighborhood so that there was a sense of the local. One of the things that the corporate architects did is they made one big atrium and then nothing else. They have office in an atrium like a corporate headquarters. I said, there are many other places in any daily routine that you have to have. You can't just be in the atrium. So one of the guys who was doing the decision making is Gordon Siegel, who's the CEO. He just stepped down from Crate and Barrel. So this was our scheme. You know, what is it? They had an expression, intensively or excessively public. So the lower floors were excessively public. And the upper floors were faculty floors. So there was one floor in the lower level, and we got light to it, then 2 really big classroom floors, and they have other admissions and things like that. And then the upper floors were faculty, and there was a faculty commons because you had to bring those people all together. They wanted their own forum. And that was our rendering. This is the Allen Center, engineering, and it's 5 stories. And it had this really beautiful stair, it was a stone stair, and it was taken away like in a blink. Just in a blink. Like it lasted about a month. Then they called the next phase the fresh start. If anyone says that to you, you should really think about it. Don't accept it. But the fresh start meant that at the last interview, Gordon Siegel said, he saw the video, and he said, I really like the way you think. Like, he didn't say, I really like your design. And he said, we really want to work with you and your team, but we want to start again. So the next thing, and remember, they're Americans and they're in Chicago, and everything is big and bold in Chicago. It's just different. This is the Allen Center. This is the head of the embryonic pond. This is the shoreline of the lake. The square became an oval, which Perkins and Will had done a master plan, so we're trying to address all of these buildings. 3 of the buildings move on to the axis of Chicago, and the 4th one sort of noses its way and kind of cups and funnels the space. This is a south-facing court outside, which will be really protected from the wind. There's another one here. This could get windy. Service is here. 4 buildings, 2 elevator cores, kitty corner here and here, washrooms and the big stairs. They removed the parliamentary stair. That's what they did. First thing, why do you want that? You're blocking the view to Chicago. Be flexible. They moved, all the classrooms came to this side. They wanted the presentation to the Oval to be the classrooms of Kellogg. And who was I to say no? And then you enter here. There's a lower level. There's a sunken courtyard here facing south. The cafeteria and dining room is here. At the ends of every loft are these stone elements, some of which have fireplaces in them, looking out to the lake, and there are lounges and study areas at the tips. And then, you know, the service court, some lower level classrooms. This is a light court. There's a cafe that you'll see later. The 4 lofts. The sort of idea that they would be bridge linked together. So there are bridges, but you leave your neighborhood and you go to another neighborhood. This is an odd looking section because of the bow tie. It's like 2 bow ties, and it's very short, but this was from the competition where they then took this, well, no, it's not. This was what we're actually doing. This one is in elevation. We still have a stair, slightly curved, You're looking west. This is the south. There's the pond. This is below grade. And then upstairs you get these figures of these kind of quartz. These things are in the clear story, and they're bringing light down. All our mechanical is up there. So there's another figure, this piece. Sustainability has a lot of great daylighting. It has, geothermal. It has a radiant sail for heating and cooling. But they're not as adventurous as Manitoba Hydro. It's odd, very conservative. So this is our building today. It's under construction. It has, we did 8 elevation studies. It's a very silvery building. It has a very deep shadow box, which I think is really beautiful, but it's very deep, and it has an anodized aluminum backing. And so it really plays with the light. The upper office pieces have 18-inch fritted glass blades, which we're working on a 3'8" module. Very strange building. In the fresh start, we arrived at an 11-foot grid, which goes to 22 to 44, which is the classroom. These are the study rooms. This is the cafe, the South Terrace. This is the big multi-purpose auditorium that commands the view, and the dean is up in here. These are EPE decks. So even though it's very cool, the decks, the plates, the fundamental organization would be separated visually on the oval. It's a big drive. When they have federal politicians come, congressmen and stuff, like you can't get onto the oval. It's all security, and so this is our mock-up, which was in Indianapolis. So this is the lower part. This is the upper part. So we just did a test in Fort Lauderdale, the technical test. So this is the second video, which is very recent. This is where we are. So you can say, well, did they compromise? What is it? Like, what happened to all those? All the Chicago guys, they took away all of the loopy things. They took away the big stair, and they disciplined the building with us. And we got to, I think, a very good place with them. This is coming in. You see the lake? The stair doesn't block your view of Chicago. Looking back at the entrance, you get all these innie things going on. And there's some interesting sort of interreactions. Basically, the buildings, the lofts are quite rational. They're gridded. But the corners and the perimeter aren't. And we've never done anything like this. This is outside of our, line of architecture. But I think we've earned the right to do this building. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting. There's a lot of great space in it. We said our motto was great space everywhere. This is their multi-purpose hall, which can be used in 2 directions, either towards Chicago or across the room. This is their cafeteria with the fireplace. You can eat on both sides of the fireplace. Lower level with the open court. And then this is up on the faculty commons where they don't want students to come. But all the faculty offices, it's like the crossroads for all faculty coming out of the 4 buildings. You can't get to the elevators without crossing. And then you get some neat innie spaces, like harbor type spaces. And Chicago will always be there. So that's number 1. These are some construction shots. And now we've been asked to look at making additions to the Allen Center and connect it to the pond. Okay, second project is miraculously, I got a call from the chief architect from Princeton University, and he said, we're interested in having you compete for a project at Princeton. And there are 3 projects that you've done that we think are relevant to Princeton. One is the Canadian Museum of Nature. The second one is the James Stewart Center for Mathematics at McMaster. And the third one was the Gardner Museum. And the way it works is they're so focused on what they want. The president of Princeton was a Canadian, Shirley Tillman. And at the interview, she welcomed us. She was very open. And she said, I was in Toronto and I went to the Gardner Museum. I just want to say it's a beautiful building. And she presented us to the vice president, provost, all the project managers. And that kind of lowered the threshold for us. So this building is the little magenta dot. Princeton is one of the great institutions in the world. This is Nassau Street. This is the campus, goes right down to Lake Carnegie. They own the golf course, they own this, they own the other side, all the way out to the highway. The high point of the campus, it's a river. It's like, I always thought it was a river, it's a lake, but it's sloping up and it crests about here. This building and plaza, this is the Scudder Plaza, and it's where Minoru Yamasaki, the World Trade Center architect, the Japanese architect who used LSD as his design methodology, designed the Robertson Center, which is where the Woodrow Wilson School is. And what Princeton is doing, all of their older campuses here, and it's the most remarkable balance between architecture and landscape I have ever experienced. The other thing about Princeton that's wonderful is that they are not stuck in collegiate Gothic. They're able to see the world as it unfolds. So there's a Frank Gehry building, there's a Vignoli building, they have a Mineo building, they have Todd Williams doing a building, Stephen Hall is doing a building, and guess what? KPMB is doing a renovation of this building, which was huge. It's about 200,000 square feet. What happened is that chemistry used to be in this building. So it was the Frick Labs, no one went near it, no one went in it. It was separated unless you were a chemist. They got a new building designed by Michael Hopkins, which is here. And it's quite beautiful, actually. And it left the Frick, which was a 1929 collegiate Gothic building, up for grabs. And they were trying to consolidate an academic neighborhood, there's the city, for the humanities, close to the library and close to McCosh Hall, close to the chapel. This is the heart. So this is really great because you're close to Nassau, you're on Washington Road. It gets more open. This is all athletics. Stephen Hall is doing a theater here. Rick Joy did the transit station for the Dinky train, that's commuter train. It's a fantastic environment. The building that we're working on, like Hamilton Hall, was 1929, exactly the same year, and it's really a modern building with a tweed coat. Beatrix Ferron did the landscape. So all of this it's beautiful, it's very intimate, and they talk about the intimacy of scale and at Princeton, but no one went in the building because it was for chemistry. The first thing we did is we went up on the roof, just like we did for the Gardner, and we saw the views from the roof, which is only the third floor. The other thing Princeton does is that, unlike any other university that I know, they renew their master plan really intensively every 10 years, and they hire one landscape architect, in this case Michael Van Valkenburg Associates out of Brooklyn, to be the landscape architect for the whole campus and for every single building. So the architects come and go, but the landscape architect is continuous. And that means they can look after their large-scale sustainability systems, stormwater management, reforesting. They plant a lot of trees. When they do green roofs at Princeton, they do research on the green roofs. That's what a university should do. It's not just a green roof to get a lead point. It's a green roof to advance knowledge and lower your carbon footprint and heat island effect, all of that stuff. But that's what universities are. They're knowledge-based, research-based. So the neighborhood we're in is this one. Todd Williams Engineering Building is here. This is called Shapiro Walk, which is named after another former president, also a Canadian. And this is McCosh Walk. So it's a very beautiful campus. Okay, so then the outlier is this Minoru Yamasaki building with this amazing piece of sculpture in a pool. But, what do you think he was thinking about? I think he was thinking about the Acropolis. This was a time maybe like a kind of Lincoln Center, that kind of classical modern with these tall, it's actually really beautiful, but architecturally, it's really beautiful. Woodrow Wilson School should. These are Ai Weiwei's zodiac sculptures. So Princeton sees art in the landscape as kind of placemaking and wayfinding. But the art they have, it's not just any old art. I mean, this is an amazing piece by one of the great artists of our time. Our building here flanks onto it, and there was a long continuous bench and magnolia trees here. And this is part of our building. This was the original 1929 building, and this is a 1960s building. There's the McCosh Hall, and the chapel is just on the other side, so it's extraordinary. But there was a divided world because of this wall, and it's a beautiful bench. It's so beautiful. The profile of it is so beautiful. So what we did is we were working for economics, international initiatives, and they're completely different. What I've learned with economics departments is they want to be in a silo. At every university I've worked in, we're working at Pennsylvania, you know, we work at Northwestern. They want to be amongst themselves. They don't want to actually connect with anybody else. We want them to connect, and we want the university to move through it. I think that's what a university is about. The international initiatives got this piece of the building, smaller, the modern wing. And this building is very classical, and then it starts to break down. And this is Shapiro Walk. This is the whole zone where Michael van Valkenburg, this is a good example where the landscape architect made a significant intervention that will change the campus. And then we went up top and we said, well, we're going to expand on top. We're going to fill in this. Their master plan said, take out the lecture hall that was, I think, done in the 70s in a courtyard, get rid of it and think about something else. So we took off all of the heavy penthouses, which were for labs exhaust, and we then have our own mechanical penthouses, which are much, much smaller. So there's heritage, there's campus, and I read this as the campus as a whole, that the heritage piece was here, and as you go east and you go south, it got more modern. In fact, you get this proto-modern thing here. And we're saying, let's make a connected world. And the plan looks, you know, in a way you say, well, that's a really boring plan, but it's actually really, for me, it's really beautiful where everything has, I think, a natural fit. That's a phrase I use. Like, it just feels like it's the right amount of space everywhere, and there's smaller social things and wider little courts. Identity beyond an atrium. There are two atriums. This is international initiatives, very outward. Economics is very internal. And then there are heritage rooms in here that we had to deal with, and it gets more modern, more modern, more modern. It just gets more open. So for us, it was a discourse on architecture across time. You know, this is the lowest level. So the last floor was up at Washington. This level is down at Shapiro Walk. We took out a bridge here to unplug this because this is going to be more of a pedestrian through route because you can go up to Nassau where all the restaurants are. We actually bridge over this, which was pretty moat-like, and then you'll see that, you know, we're actually bridging over this and going into our international initiatives because this is the one that gives us the link to the Woodrow Wilson School. And then we have 3 glass pavilions. These are the heritage chimneys, and the ends are raised up, but it's really beautiful. So in these rooms, you see the, you know, this is the building, so these are just studies, but these were the magnolias. And then what happened is, you know, we were accepting this. We thought this was totally, you can't change it. It's the magnolias, it's, you know. The landscape architect who has carriage over the master plan as well said, no, you can change it. In fact, it's a good idea and we're gonna change it. So they took out this wall, they cut down the trees because they had fulfilled their life cycle, and we thought there'd be a major protest, and there wasn't. And we're connecting over this, so this is open now to Scudder. There's still a retention wall and there'll be seating. This is our new atrium piece. These are all redone, the heritage building. Economics are really happy now, which is what I want them to be. This is our entrance, handicapped access, a big stair, and these are stone. This is like what we did at the Gardner, but you're basically facing south. So we're trying to do a kind of screen for that. This is not this is a 1960s building, and this is Argillite, which is a kind of purple and gray. Princeton's got a lot of this. And all we did is try to clean up the facade. We removed a 1990s very bad Payette, who are very good, but they did a very bad addition to the 60s building for chemistry. It was about 10 feet wide and it had sort of, work areas for researchers. We just stripped it right off, went back to 1960, cleaned it up, made a second entrance off of Shapiro Walk. This goes through and changed the stair. Michael did this, changed the stair up to Scudder and tried to make this a real intersection of convergence. So that's how it is. He took this down. I think it's a great move. And I couldn't have made that proposal. I thought I'd be kicked off the campus. But so it opens it all up. And the green is now bermed back. So when you're looking out of our building, you actually see onto the plaza and you see the foreground. So this is our stuff. This looks weird, this slide. There's something going on with the projector. But anyway, back to here, just to point this out, that at Princeton, there are a lot of outdoor covered areas that are Gothic punches that walk through residences. Like you're inside, you're then covered in outside, then you go through, you're in another courtyard. And we wanted to kind of give the 1960s, which was not interested in any of this, some quality and character, and to make a place where people would gather before you actually go into the building. This is in the old building coming off of Washington, so it looks like, the Parliament center block. It's all stone. And when you go into the courtyard, we stripped out everything. We just gutted it all. And then we're making a room that gets clear story light, has an acoustic wood ceiling, and a floating conference room that can be divided for economics. If you go down this stair, you go down to the lower level and through. And what we did is we worked with them. I mean, they're very challenging to work with because they're so intelligent, but there were different concepts that we called study and living room and lounge. And they eventually settled on this. And then looking back to Washington, this is kind of fantastic. There are bridges that are hung, and you see the layers of heritage, the new system, a bridge over, the stone faces of the sidewalls of the atrium, the Gothic punch. I mean, I love this sort of stuff. I mean, it's layers and layers and layers and layers. I like complexity. This is up on the room where we realize you're in the sweet layer of space of the campus. The best architecture is visible from our glass meeting rooms, and they love these rooms. They're going to be really fantastic. And then the best of heritage, where we took one of the reading rooms that was there in their library, and we converted it into a faculty lounge, which, really. And then the corridors. We said, let's not make corridors. Let's try to think about the halls as almost exterior spaces. So they're stone, like the columns are stone. And then there were little setbacks like this that I think are really interesting, where you go into different departments and we're moving from the heritage to the new. And then the building's beautiful. The tweed coat is beautiful. And then the classrooms, you're at Princeton, they wanted intimacy, and we wanted the acoustic wrap. And so these are kind of modified, but they're small. Everything at Princeton's smaller. The total student body is under 8,000. And catch this, the ratio of faculty to students is 1 to 5 at Princeton. That's intimacy. This is the scraping out. There's Woodrow Wilson. Then they'll take this down. So we're filling this in. There's new concrete layered off of the heritage and the argillite, and you see some of the original building. We have a stair. This is where we think food makes sense because people are coming across the plaza, and there's an elevator. And then looking out to the magnolias, you can sort of see the whisper. At Princeton, you have to really depict everything. They want to see everything. There's not a single rendering that tells the story of the project, but it's very, very complex, and it's very big. And there's another meeting room for international initiatives that looks over Woodrow Wilson. Okay, last project. Another competition. Ken Greenberg, who is one of the best urban thinkers, I'd say in the world, but for sure in Canada, but he was actually the acting planning director of Boston, even though he lived in Toronto. That's how highly they thought of him. He's a really good thinker. He worked with them on the master plan for BU. So you get the Charles River and you get MIT and Harvard on the other side, the really major brands. And BU doesn't have the kind of endowment or fundraising capacity, but they wanted to rethink their campus, and it's a kind of a noodle of a campus. And you see this green system, it goes from Olmsted's Boston Garden, the gardens, Commonwealth Avenue comes right through the campus, and they have other, medical campuses that are kind of way out there. But in this section, the proposition that BU put out, and I haven't seen this quite anywhere, which I think is their initiative, which is they're saying that computational sciences are the tool for all problem solving across all disciplines, whether it's public health policy, whether it's mathematics or engineering, which it comes out of, but they're saying for everything else. And so they said, we want to make a hub, a building, which is a convergence of every discipline on Commonwealth Avenue. And we're going to hold a competition, so guess what? It's the same architects, KPF, Peter Boland again, this time Moshe Safdie, and Elkis Manfredi, who are quite good, and they're in Boston. So we thought we have probably zero chance for this one too. So, but we had a line of thought, and it was about trying to draw Commonwealth Avenue into the building. And there's the site, it's a parking lot. This is the Sargent building. This is beautiful. These are all Boston, Bay State Road, all the residences are here. This is, I think this is Cram and Goodhue, who did a lot of the American campuses. And then CERT did the tower, kind of back, it's now being converted into law school. And they're trying to get this connection happening too on this Granby Street. They're three of the ugliest towers I've ever seen, student residences here. They're really bad, but this is really great. This is great city building. Frederick Law Olmsted and all the lucky cities that he did work in have a true legacy. This is a legacy. And you get Commonwealth Avenue, all of the Back Bay area, this was nothing. This was all landfill. It's artificial. It's totally artificial. That's why I love it. This is it today, and so very Boston, lots of students. This is the School of Management, which is a big, heavy building, but some great trees, but they also have transit here. So here's our building. These are the residences, which I hope you concur with my assessment, but that's what they are. Got to call it as you see it. This is the Sargent building. There's a kind of datum level through Commonwealth Avenue. These are Cram's buildings, which are Collegiate Gothic. And what we wanted to do was to create a kind of more transparent base and a sheltered protection and an overhang that takes you to the Charles River, and a laneway connection between us and the Sargent building, and a roof terrace, much like we did vertical campus again, and then to create, through the shifting of the plan, a series of outdoor terraces related to stacked neighborhoods in a vertical campus, plus a system of interconnecting stairs. Not that anyone would interconnect, this is, I think, 15 floors, but you'll see how this plays out. So this is the big flow. Like at the change of class, this is a parade, and these crosswalks come right into our building. The traffic lights, streetcars are here, heavy traffic on Commonwealth. We take them to the center. There's a podium, and then this tower. And the tower is cantilevered in different directions because they own the lane, and the site is tight, and you had to anticipate another 100,000 square foot building. This building's about 200,000 square feet. So we had a central atrium. We had a kind of cladding system. We had a stacking idea that shared classrooms and collaborative space were low These are high traffic. And then you'd get mathematics, you'd get computer science, and then the Hariri, not CMAC Hariri, but the Hariri Institute, which is well funded at the top. They were always going to be at the top. And then you'd get central administration having, and some labs, having supervision over the terrace. That was the scheme. So this is walkable, there's outdoor stuff, this is admin, math and stats. They didn't mind. They were the only people. These people are pretty bunkered in. They really want to not be connected, but you know, we want them to connect. And then we have a terracotta system that is trying to, you know, there's a lot of work to be done on this yet, but there's a series of terraces that parallel Commonwealth and lift up to the entrance. So you can enter the building here and come up. This is admin, and it sort of spirals around and then looks out over the river. This is Jose Luis Serres. This is a guy who studied Le Corbusier and was great. And what do you think he's thinking about? He's thinking about two things. One is San Gimignano, and he's thinking about the Unité d'Habitation. And now it's the law school. This is Cram here. And then our building at night. The typical floor is a constant core, and then it's a steel building. Boston and Philadelphia are both steel buildings. Like this, I never realized that, you know, Toronto has a lot of concrete and steel, but certain cities, it has to do with historical, you know, the power of certain construction companies and suppliers, but anyways, they're steel cities. Most buildings are steel. There are some concrete, but most buildings are steel. So these are cantilever. We worked with Barry Charnish, who's a great engineer, great structural engineer. And we looked at a 12-foot grid at 11, 10 and a half, many, many things. So this is a 12-foot grid, 12-foot wide offices. Then you go 24 for certain rooms and 40, you know, 48. These are the plans, which kind of just rotate around the core. But every time you see the green, you're getting a terrace. So it's a very nice sort of systematic way to break down a tall building into a vertical campus, totally engaged with Commonwealth Avenue. And then we looked at the lane and looked at the landscaping behind these townhouses, which are student residences now, but may become institutes. So we're developing a whole precinct of academic life where this is the epicenter of computational sciences at BU. Bike storage is in here. This is a temporary landscape where another smaller building can come later. This is the section, it's all steel. They're interconnecting stairs. The ground floor, what's interesting is the director of the Hariri Institute, he said, you know, I don't want it to be about, it's not about computers. It's about people. I want the ground floor to have the buzz of people hanging out and dealing with problems spontaneously. So it's pretty open. There's a hole to below. There's a cafe. There are outdoor places and you know, whiteboards on outside the building, in between, on the face of an adjacent building, which would really be a party wall. And there's lounges wrapping the core. This is all service, trucks and all that. No parking. Another no parking, because you're on a transit line and most students don't have cars. The podium, you know, simple classrooms within the framework, the linear atrium, the cascade is coming up through here, and there are, you know, this is an argument, especially with the ADA, but the top is accessible, the bottom is accessible, and you know, this may go through a bump and grind, but they love the idea, and they want to be able to argue for it to get a building permit. Typical floors, you know, these have all been worked out with the users. No, we should go back to that one. Wait a minute. So at this floor level, this was when it showed all classrooms, and it's been switched because the president of BU said that no one will supervise this. So we have administrative functions at this level because they love the idea of an outdoor deck, but they want one that has some eyes on it, some people who are responsible for it, and there are liabilities that relate to that. So we showed this video. I think this video won the competition for us. I told them we wanted to give Harvard and MIT building envy. And at the end of the day, it kind of looks like an architect's office. That's what I think. I think architects have a lot to, they do it all the time. I mean, your office is actually probably open. The core is wrapped in white glass. The finishes are really pretty Spartan. It's not about the finishes, it's about the idea of the building, which they love. The mathematicians, they love the building. And then the Hariri has a protected, the curtain wall goes up. We got a standing ovation for this. For only the Fenway Park part of it. So that's the work. You know, every building implies a city. There are, you know, your career as an architect is a kind of evolving, rolling, intellectual trajectory where if you're really smart, you're able to make something of every big perception that you have. You should own it and bring it into your work. So I'm equally interested in the public realm, all the stuff from the city halls. I think that's so important. But all of these things are, I think the future for me is about doing it in a very integrated way and working with people like landscape architects that I really love to work with, and sustainability consultants, and you know, thinkers beyond architecture. Really listen. I really watch what's going on in the schools of management because they're our clients. But I've learned so much. I mean, at the Rotman School, what I really think is amazing today, and this is the end. Marcia McLuhan said, when one technology replaces another, the former becomes an art form. So his example was penmanship. You know, there was a time when everyone could handwrite beautifully, and you could actually read what they were writing. And now, many people can't write very well, cursive, and they can't even read their own writing. So when you see someone, usually it's someone from the UK or something like that, has really beautiful, you know, kind of script, it's an art form. Or I would say even in a day of Facebook and so much texting, that real-time, face-to-face communication and conversation is an art form today. A real-time meeting is such a premium, like a premium experience. This is what architecture works with. Like, that's what we've got. Like, you can go to the virtual if you want, but I'm saying that the premium today is in the real, the premium, because there's so much distribution elsewhere. And I think that it has great resonance. Like, it's, first of all, with McLuhan, it's not either or. He predicted everything we're doing, but he also had this counter way of looking at it's not just throw everything away. And I think the thing that's the most heartening for me is that the things that for me are most important as an architect are premium today. Like they're super premium. And we know that it's so hard, but we come to the States with a different set of values. We're not architects. I think that's just not a good concept. I think we are good design thinkers. And I think that's what the next generation of architects has to be. And you've got the best platform in Canada to do that, because if you're in the States, you won't have confidence in the public realm. There are fewer hybrids. Everybody's doing their own thing. You know, why would you build a vertical campus? You just do floor, 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 floor. It's actually quite boring. Why would you depend on, you know, provide no parking? You know, that's not a smart thing to do, right? Why don't you just knock down the heritage building, and why would you make a building with 100% fresh air? Why bother planning comprehensively when you can just do it block by block? So my argument is a position about architecture actually not being about nature, but being about cities and being about building the future that we deserve. Thank you very much. Not bad on time, so questions.
Yeah, thank you for taking questions, Bruce. That's great. If there are questions, it's hard to see with the lights on, so I'm just going to stand up to the side.
Okay.
Do a little pointing.
I will confess anything you want. No, seriously. Like, I was going to give you a different talk, and it would show. I was not going to show any of those projects. I was going to show the 7 in a shorter, you know, didactic way. But you know, I thought, well, I've done it. So, where's the question? Who's the question?
Start with a really simple one.
Yeah.
Boston University.
Yeah.
The diagonal purlins that you've got.
Yeah.
They're steel.
No, they're terracotta.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah. And they're basically at Vaughan City Hall. We used architectural terracotta horizontally on, but they're very deep on all the south and west facades. And we checked it out with Transolar, who are our sustainability. I mean, they'll model it. On this one, they felt, and they do all the studies, that the diagonal would deal well with, you know, you're normally supposed to do horizontal on the south, vertical on the west, but they modeled the diagonal. And it's all pretty good, but there's one time in the afternoon when the light, it's totally exposed. So we've got to resolve that, but they're terracotta. And there's a great story that there's a family business in Buffalo where the parents made clay pots, those orange clay pots, and the children are making building systems now, terracotta. And I think that's the transformation of American entrepreneurship that I thought Obama was pointing to, that there would be some real thinking about taking something like pots and all of a sudden saying we can do much more now. We can make, you know, building facades, and I love that, you know.
They know everything. They know everything about you. Yeah. A lot of these you've done through competitions. How early do you get your whole consultant team involved?
Early.
Through the whole process?
Yeah, earlier the better. I've learned that. You know, basically I learned a lot. And one of the things is that at a certain point you become pretty confident in the way you think, and you know yourself and what you think. But every project where we've really opened up and really engaged, like scientific minds, the best engineers aren't, you know, I would ask you, where is real engineering going on in the world today? Because everything's so safe. But when you do, then good things happen. If everyone comes into the table, mechanical engineers, I mean, I would like to talk to them, give them a lecture, because everybody says no, and it's all about controls, and you can make up any reason you want. But we did hydro, and hydro, Manitoba Hydro is the best building from a comfort level I've ever done. Natural, it has daylight autonomy. You don't have to turn any lights on in Winnipeg. It has thermal comfort because of our exterior envelope geothermal slabs. It has the air quality, which I'd say 30% of the population has respiratory issues. Asthma would be the worst. My sister has asthma, but it's all, it's breathing, it's just air. And a lot of it is because air is generally recycled, recirculated. In that building, the air comes in and it comes through the floor, comes up, we breathe it, it goes out once. And people don't really, they don't, if you go to the building, you get it, because as soon as you walk into hydro, you realize you're in a different kind of building. All these people, I get emails from all these people who have respiratory issues. And they say, we really love the building. It's one of the few buildings in Winnipeg that I feel comfortable in. Well, that's enough for me. I mean, I'm happy. Most people look at it and think it's an office building. It's not. It's a machine. That building's a breathing machine. That's what it is. And it's a really great office space, but it's more than that. People ask, why is it all glass? That's another question. Like I go and present it at conferences, like, why is it all glass? When it's minus 30, Winnipeg gets more sunshine. Like we're working in Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, they get a vast amount of solar radiation. And the double walls, and the innovation is that in Europe, a double wall will be a single glazed outside, a double glazed inside. It has to do with their climate. You start with climate. In Canada, where you have extreme temperatures, double glazed outside, single glazed, manually operated windows inside, the buildings outside are mechanically opening on the buildings. There are only 3 people who run the whole building. There's hardly anything in the mechanical room. There's no sheet metal in our building. It's an amazing thing that everybody wanted us to fail. And it taught me a lot. One was that the double glass walls in a city that has high solar hours, number of sunny hours, you get the greenhouse effect. And our walls heat up even when it's minus 30, and it could be like 40, plus 40 in our walls. And it keeps the whole building, it's like having a thermal jacket, but that's like a greenhouse because it's heating up. So that's why we're able to save all the energy. We've gone far beyond our model. We were hoping for a 60% reduction in energy, and we're at like 68 or 7 because they keep tuning the building. But these are things I didn't think of when we were doing it. I mean, the German guys, they knew everything that was going to go on. They're physicists. So bring them in early, because there are a lot of people who know a lot more about the physics than architects. If you find a good consultant, continue to work with them. That's the other thing. That's how you build a really good team. Like don't just jump around. I mean, if you're lucky enough to find a great consultant that you can collaborate with, you stick with them. There have to be a big reason why you would change. Can you speak up, please?
The second strategy you have hybrid.
Yeah.
That's a term that comes from biology.
Come closer. I can't hear you very well. Come right up to the mic.
Because I'm working on my thesis.
And what's your thesis?
It's urban space in Mexico City. That comes.
Tell them what your thesis is.
I'm here just to ask. Hi.
Come here, don't be afraid.
Take the opportunity.
Yeah, tell us. It's great. I'm curious.
So I'm working on Mexico City, specifically in 3 spaces, urban spaces in Mexico City. And these spaces are considered hybrid spaces. So I'm reading, let's say, Canclini, hybrid cultures, and also Bahaba, third space, and also Foucault, Michel Foucault, the other space. So, and I know it comes from biology, and we borrow that term, like, to explain culture.
Like plants and,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm interested to know what does it mean for you as an architect,
Mhm.
being hybrid or hybrid architecture, and how does that help you to create your architecture?
Good question. I think that the hybrid, like say taking the example of the TIFF Bell Lightbox, would be between something that is quasi-public and something that is very private, like the developers are all private sector developers. It's about programmatic hybridity. For example, I kept asking them, like, you know, what's the relationship between someone who's living in a condo and the Bell Lightbox? And they have a system where you actually get access to all of the film archive, which is tremendous. And there's also the sense that, you know, each piece of the puzzle comes together and creates a kind of, you know, an unanticipated synergy between food and film. It is really, the way I guess the way I'm using it is really in terms of spheres of activity that are coming together, where you find things or you bump into people that you would never have bumped into, because, but there are a lot of people, believe me, who go to see films. I mean, I work right across the street from it, so I feel the building, you know, and also I worked a lot with the filmmakers. I mean, one of the pleasures of doing the Bell Lightbox is that, you know, in terms of, you know, filmmakers, they created an artists committee, which was David Cronenberg and Adam McGoyan and Jeremy Podeswa, Deepa Mehta, what's her name, Sarah Pauly was on the committee, and you know, you can say, well, is it, you know, what's film, what's architecture? For me, it was about, you know, just making, I kept saying, we're going to make a city of film. It's a huge building, and can you make all the pieces come together in a way where they start learning from each other? There's a huge educational component where my kids go, actually, because, you know, most kids like to make films. And so it's a kind of understanding how each piece and each flow and each stakeholder comes into the institution called the City of Film. And that's, so for example, even like we did the restaurants, we did the Canteen restaurant, Luma, you know, Oliver Bonacini, they're a very successful brand of restaurants, but they also do catering within it, and they've become, you know, tied into the life of film culture in Toronto. But they also, you can also order up. So there's an idea that even though you're in a condo, it's like being in a hotel. You can order a steak or salad or whatever you want. I'm interested in the building as a kind of social condenser, bringing people together that might never have been together because of the circumstance that the Bell, not Bell, but the Toronto International Film Festival didn't have a home. They were just in they were at Yonge and Carlton in a lease space, and what an opportunity that they imagined, you know, that would actually came true. Because often people talk about hybridity in architecture, and I think they see it as a formal hybridity, maybe, you know, a formal hybridity where, for me, I wanted each piece to have a distinct, recognizable identity within which they could then be brought together. And the first scheme we did was very mute. I mean, you couldn't tell where anything was. Now you can tell where everything is. That was driven by the filmmakers. They said, you know, I want you to, you know, express the cinema screening rooms. They're within your city of film. They're the cathedrals. And so all of those volumes, which are clad in zinc, are pushing through the facade. They weren't there in the first instance. I mean, I was just talking to Adam McGoyan, but, you know, and the nice thing about the filmmakers is at the end of the day, they said, you've got the final cut. You can do, you know, we're just telling you what we think. But they were in the room with us in the kitchen. We said, come into the kitchen. We showed them everything we're doing, and they talked about it. And we talked about every concept for the building. And then they said, but you've got the last cut. It's your film. Any others?
Yes, I have one question, but it's more about you guys come together to develop the competition, how the charrettes work and how the main idea and the party starts for each project.
Well, to be honest, really honest, most of the competitions, it's a lonely start. You're just by yourself, and I'm actually, I always end up missing the briefing because of my schedule, and then everybody else goes, and I don't even want to talk to anybody about it, and then I usually do some sketching, and then I share it with people, and we debate it. I'm very open to another idea. If the other idea is really powerful, it could come forward. I have 2 women partners, and I grew up with 2 sisters, so I'm used to having to fight my way to the front. It's really hard. They're 2 to 1, they gang up on you. But we have a really long-lasting partnership. I mean, I think it's amazing that we're 27 years, and they're incredibly intelligent, my partners, and we have tons of young people because our model is attracting all these people. We have people from the American universities, from McGill. McGill's a very good school. They have very smart people. And we bring them all together. We have people from Europe. And it's very, very collaborative. I think of the thing like kind of a big kitchen, and there are different chefs. I look at a lot of things like orchestras and kitchens, like where everybody's preparing the meal, and there is specialization, that's for sure. But there are very young chefs who are superb, and they're coming in, and we've spawned many really good offices, independent offices of ours, and we all remain pretty close. I mean, CMAC worked for us. Okay, CMAC Hariri, he was one of the people who worked in our office. But there's so many of them. Heather Doubledam, Donald Chong, Williamson Chong. I mean, there's a dozen firms. Drew Mandel worked in our office, And to me, it's like kind of music and cooking. I mean, there are some master chefs. There are people who are very specialized. Like, we have people in our office who know more about curtain wall and glass than anybody in the country. They really know, and they love playing that role, and their opinion is huge, and so it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of improvisation. I mean, look at one of the films, the film that won the Oscar, The Birdman. Did you see that? Did you see that film? I mean, it's a crazy film. It didn't win the best script. You know why? Because it was all improv. That's why. It's a fantastic film, one of the greatest films. And I knew as soon as I saw it that it would win something somewhere because it was that zany. And I saw in it the same sort of system where there's like an opening theme, and then everybody's all over it. And I've got, like, when I was looking on my iPad, we're doing a competition right now, and we're working with West 8, and we're working with Ken Greenberg, and I've got all my people, they're all working there now, and they're sending me stuff, and some of it's fantastic, some of it's terrible. I tell them, don't do that. And I have to listen to Adrian Guza, he said, don't do that, so, I don't know if it's hybridity. It's like, no, it's a lot of fun. And if you don't have fun doing it, why do it? Architecture is so tough as a profession. You have to, the most creative thing is to make it into something that's really productive and focused, and I'm very proud of that because we've been doing this for a long time now. I can actually say we've been doing this for a long time, and we're exploring things that we never thought of before, and we're getting opportunities that we never had before, and it's a practice that is attracting really young people. We have a large number of women in our office. It's really great. And we're doing all kinds of things. We're doing a sewage treatment plant, which I never thought. We just got a private school in New York, which is amazing. The competition, as I said, you go across, it's 10 times. You go to New York, it's 20 times. They're all there. All they really, you know them. They're all there. So, it's an interesting time. But I also see, life is short, and you know, for me, it's about, you know, making the next generation of really good thinkers and architects. That's my job. That's my job. That's what I see. You know, I teach within my office. I used to teach a lot, but then I had kids. So I stopped teaching in the School of Architecture. And I see things differently now. Like I'm very actively involved with the School of Architecture in Toronto, the Daniels, and I'm very actively involved with the Canadian Centre for Architecture. And for me, the future is about constructing the position of architecture, landscape design, city building, so that it has an impact. That's the future for me. And so it's very open. That's where I started.
So, well, listen, Bruce, that your last comment actually, have impact. I mean, that's a good message, I think, for all of us as citizens of Canada, not just architects. So we want to thank you on behalf of the London Society
Thank
of
you.
Architects. And while I had my hands in my pocket, I found a nice little London pin that I
Oh,
had.
great, great.
You can put it right next to the Order of
Yeah,
Canada.
put it right here. That's where I went.